translated by Robert Bly. I am not I am this one walking beside me, which I do not see, whom at times I manage to visit, and whom at other times I forget. The one who remains silent when I talk, the one who forgives sweet when I hate, the one who takes a walk where I am not, the one who will remain standing when I die. So our identity is a tricky thing. Our culture likes to deal in the concrete, in the real, in the explainable. Our identity comes in around us and from this culture and sort of creates, I know him, I know her. We get named, we get labeled, and it sort of formulates around us, even if it changes and shifts over time. Yeah, I know him. Woo, the quote I use a lot in the workshop, he said, the reason we're so miserable is 95% of the time we go about worrying about ourselves, and there isn't one. So, one thing we do know about ourselves is that we are affected. We're responsive to things. We are changed by outside energies. If you go back behind the house and it's concreted over or it's a rubble, or if you go back behind the house and it's a garden, the difference isn't just visual, it isn't just the odors, it is palpable. And it sort of blew my mind trying to figure that, why is that the case? How come when I go back there, I'm actually physically changed, opened and expanded, or somewhat reduced by the rubble? What's the thing that goes on there? What happens to us when we sit out by the ocean? What happens to us when we look into the eyes of a wild animal? What happens to you if a giant elephant gently touches you with his trunk? When you hear the stories of those guys freeing the whales from the netting and then the whales coming up and thanking them, looking in the eye, if you were that person, what would that do to you? What does that story do to you? Your body chemistry changes. You shift in your consciousness. We are responsive. So these questions, what happens to you when? And the attention needed to answer these questions are not frivolous. They tune us in to what happens to us, to the scale of our responses, how we get quieted, how we get awakened. They direct our attention away from the chatter of the mind, our ideas about things, our judgments, our namings, our labelings. They shut us up and they attune us to this affected area inside ourselves, to the place we feel it when we are looking in the eyes of that animal or touched by that elephant. The part of us that gets opened. And this affected area is an important part for me about how I talk and teach about painting, because it is the area we need to tune into. Edward Hirsch, the poet, says it takes huge intellectual dignity to stay in the affected area, to stay listening, to stay attentive, to stay open to what it's doing to you, to listening to that place, to your body's response. So I'm directing us here to this subjective personal space, because it is here we get a chance to experience the scale of ourselves, to break past the confines of the ideas of ourselves. It is also here where we find our moral compass. Our conscience pricks our body. It's the same affected area. We're affected by that. It is here we find our joy. It is also where we find each other. We find that in these deeper experiences that we have, they are in fact shared, that our sense of isolation and difference is the illusion. Although we are unique, our internal architecture is old and shared. One of the ways we get to experience this is through painting and drawing and the arts. They work on the affected area. They work physically onto your body. They are fine-tuned energy. That's what a painting is for me. And, you know, we do these workshops, and after the workshops, everybody takes their paintings down, and the energy of the room changes. Like this show, the way Ryan hung it, there's a different energy in that hallway than there is out here. It's the same in the garden, that place when you go back, how you're affected. So giving credibility and attention to what it does to you is central to how it works. And, you know, my brother's a scientist, and so for years I would ask him, how come when I go back in the garden I feel this? And he was like, I don't know. He's a geologist, what do they know? But I recently was reading some scientific literature that sort of points to this, and this understanding that we live in a universe that is, everything is communicating by electromagnetic communication. And, you know, our TV and our radio are very primitive pickups on how this communication, but every living thing is a receiver and generator of electromagnetic communication. It's a giant web of interconnected communication. And the organ in our body that is the most sophisticated generator and receiver of electromagnetic communication is our heart. And we've been sort of trained to think of the heart as a pump, the sort of 19th century industrial vision of this thing that pumps the blood through your veins. The heart is much more than that. And you know, the artists, the seers, the visionaries have talked about that for thousands of years. But at this point, the science is starting to open that up. So, to get a sense of the sophistication of this communication, and I think that example of going back to the garden behind the house is one. You know, when you go into these buildings and there's this fake plant, and they're really good fake plants. So like 2020, you're convinced. But somehow, I mean, I don't know, I hate them. I really hate them because they shortchange me. And I could never figure out why, but it is because what happens to us when we stand in front of a plant or a tree and we sort of tune in, what happens is the wavelengths, the electromagnetic wavelengths between us create a coherency rather than the sort of disturbed waves. It becomes an even flow of energy. And that's what we experience. That feeling we have when we're quieted by nature is that coherency of these wavelengths between our emissions and our receptions of this in this electromagnetic communication. So when it's a fake plant, our hearts know it and our hearts feel cheated. And you can't fool it. You can't do it. Even if you know, have a giant movie screen and you photograph this plant and you make it flow a little in the wind and you blow on it and you create odors, whatever. And you take a movie of it and you have the best sound system and you put somebody in front of it, they still will feel cheated. They won't have that communication, which comes from one-on-one contact, body-to-body contact. So a lot of our cultural conversations, our ways of being in the world, tend to separate us from this basic connection to the natural world, which feeds us in the most profound way and talks to us through our hearts. So when we stand outside and we stand in nature, we're put in relationship with its complexity, its richness, its vitality, its infinite layers and its vibrations. And these, even though we can't see them and tabulate them with our mind, we are getting that connection. We are having that experience in our hearts of the infinite complexity of this natural world. And it is experienced in our bodies. And our minds are never quite in sync. They can't keep up. They can't stand in the ever-changing quality of now. Our minds will constantly want to conclude, like, yeah, it's a pretty good sunset. I remember a sunset. Take you right away from that sunset. Takes you out of the now. But your heart is ideally situated to receive this experience in all its complexity. So, the mind will tell you, how far is it from LA to San Francisco? I don't know how many 100 miles, a few hundred miles. That's an illusion. If you go straight, maybe it is. If you follow the shoreline, it's a lot further. If you're a snail and you follow the shoreline, if you actually stop and hang out on the shoreline, you start to enter into a relationship with the infinite, where the rational mind is saying, just get in your car, 3 hours, you'll be there. What we pass by is what we hunger for, that connection to the infinite. So, painting picks up on what nature does to us. When you stand in front of a tree, or you put your arms around a giant tree, or you put your hands on a rock, that feeling you get, that nameless feeling you get, is an aesthetic feeling. Paintings, including realistic paintings, are not just about communicating the appearance of nature. The key here for me is that they are handmade, and they are accumulated marks, an accumulated recording of touch. This is why they suffer from reproduction. The first-hand experience of a painting is like the first-hand experience of nature. And touch is precise, and it is unnameable. There are no words for the precision of the pressure of Michelangelo's chisel on the rock. There are no words for the quality of touch, the reassuring touch, the loving touch, all the ways we touch each other. Even when we listen closely, we are touched. The waves, the sound waves touch us. When we see, we are touched. But in order to be touched, we have to be receptive. And the mind, again, will keep going to name and lessen our ability to be receiving. So the body's ideally situated for this receiving. And touch, whatever kind of touch it is, you think of all the different ways the artist touched the canvas, from Mondrian painting over and over again those lines, those black lines, just painting them in excruciating cleanness and sharpness, the sharpness of what he called pure spirit, to the sort of all of the vibrations and spit and bits of hair that come into Rembrandt's application, all of the ways they vibrate on our bodies, all of the different ways. It is a deliciously beautiful world of unnamed substances. There are no names for how it affects us, but it affects our bodies. So it brings us present, and like nature, they bring us into relationship with the infinite. So just as nature, from its complexity, the ecosystem that it is, can bring us in touch with the infinite, painting does it through touch, so that you follow Rembrandt's finger through the paint. You feel the mark on your body, that vibration. It's that level, no matter whether it's realistic or abstract, that the painting's touching into the infinite. So, people will always hold up, or whatever. My last lecture, somebody held up the invitation and said, "So what are you trying to tell me? What is Picasso trying to tell me?" And, it's such a profound and awesome question. But I would answer, the way to learn about painting is to be open to the experience of painting. It's not about meaning it's not me trying to tell you something. It's me trying to create record an experience I'm having that you can then experience yourself. So put yourself in front of the painting, see what happens when you walk around them, when you leave the room and return. Is there any difference in your energy field? Just pay attention inside. It's simple, very straightforward monitoring of the affected area inside yourself. But too often we're busy trying to figure, well, what does it mean? What am I supposed to feel? What? You know, this whole thing, is it modern? Is it post? Well, it's so much simpler. It's so much more available. And it's so much more straightforward. And if you don't stand in front of my painting, you don't feel anything, find a painting you do feel something in front of. You know, go to where the action is for you. And listen to what it does to you. And find where the doorways are. So touch, the sort of carrier of painting, to communicate more deeply must be unself-conscious. Otherwise it loses energy. Self-conscious marks lose that energy. They basically communicate discomfort and self-consciousness. And painting is all about energy. So as we paint and as we view paintings, we touch into our original nature, our wildness, our oneness with the natural intelligence, the spontaneity of the athlete, the physicality of doing it, the precision of spontaneity, the hitting of it right. All of those things come from our animal past, and they're in our body. Wallace Stevens said, you have to know the exact sound to write a poem. And then he says, you do actually know it, you just don't know how you know it. Your body knows it. If you listen, you will get the instruction. So it's a matter of learning how to listen. And when you get it, you won't know how you got it. Because it's not coming through this channel, it's coming through this channel, which is the one that is actually connected to the electromagnetic communications of the universe. That's the one, that's the doorway to the deeper instruction. This is just trying to keep up, poor thing. The heart is the part that knows, that is plugged in and connected. We don't need to educate our heart. We need to listen to it. We need to realize it is our doorway. Now, people get confused, I think, because they think of the heart as an emotional being. And the heart is a much cleaner, stronger attuner than that. The thing is, the heart communicates to the brain through emotions. So we tend to be pretty reductive in our reading of emotions. But to think of the heart as emotional is to confuse the communication technique with the knowledge of the heart. So the spiritual teachers will tell us it isn't through the mind, it isn't through the emotions, it's through the soul. Those are the languaging that they use to bring us further into this deeper listening. So when we listen to the heart and we're being communicated to the mind through the emotion, the confusion comes in. Well, it's just an emotional knowledge. It's not. The heart's knowing is much more profound. And the stillness that we get from nature isn't emotional. There's a difference when you stand out there and you are silenced and you are stilled and you forget yourself. The thing that comes in isn't emotion. It's a much different sensation. It's palpably different. And that attunement is the deeper listening. So we're paying attention to that deeper thing. So what opens you, what touches you, what creates the silence for you, what lets, John Cage said he loves music because it silences the mind to create room for divine intervention. It creates the space, the sensuous beauty of the paint, brings us out like nature does, the beauty of nature, to silence us, to seduce us into the silence. So it's not just the seduction, it's the listening, it's the silence that becomes the paintings. So the wildness is in the place beyond the confines of the known. It is in the deeper intelligence, that intelligence that heals the cut on your arm, that intelligence that will perhaps wipe us off the face of this planet if we keep heating it up. The planet will be fine. The rigor is embedded in that intelligence, its coherency and its instruction. We learn like our ancestors, to listen more closely, then it will come in. I mean, that's the amazing thing for me about painting, is that as I paint, I go as fast as I can past what I've done, past what I know, to that place where I don't know what I'm doing. Intellectually, I'm being carried by my body's movements. And at that point, things happen. Visitation happens. Coherency comes in sometimes spreading across the painting like crackling across a pond. I can't keep up. It comes in like that because that wildness has embedded in it all of the coherencies that we see manifested in the natural world. We are not separate from that. We separate ourselves from that. So when we do this, practice this, we are brought home to the expansiveness of who we are. That's why Emerson said, aesthetics is about homecoming and belonging. As artists, we ride the body's knowing, with the mind in close attendance, listening for deeper instruction. Emerson again would say, have the mind inebriated on nectar, on the sensuous, and the sensual delight. And then he would tell us that it's a sacred animal. Let the reins go. Let it go. It'll bring you home. So that's sort of one way of talking about it. And I'm bringing in language like soul and spirit. And, so just how the words strike you is key. You could also say that painting deals with the concrete. Color is concrete. The act of painting is an illusion, right? The surface is concrete. The pictorial space that opens up is an illusion. The gift of painting in this way is that you get to experience the illusion and the reality, the concrete and the unreal, simultaneously without any separation. And that is a huge part of what our journey in this life is like. Because our concrete, Suzuki said life is like getting on a boat that's going out to sink. Voyage of choice, not a good ending. And yet, our imaginations, I am the one who will remain standing when I die, our imaginations tell us otherwise. We have a deep relationship with what is unreal in that sense, with this other side. And so that sort of juxtaposition of our consciousness is always sort of trying to figure it out. And painting is a place for those two things. For the painting to work, they have to coexist totally naturally. So we say the way to learn about painting is to be open to the experience of painting. We could say that the way to learn about your soul, who you really are, is to be open to the experience of soul, the experience of what expands you, lifts you. And painting can help in this. This is why, for me, it is at its heart a spiritual practice. And the matrix of this practice is love, the attunement to the heart. So, thank you.